The first thing they teach you in search and rescue is that every call matters. Every lost child, every injured hiker, every overdue camper. You go. No exceptions. At least, that's what they tell the public. What they don't tell anyone is that there is one rescue call we never answer. Not because it's dangerous. Not because we don't have the manpower. Because nobody has ever come back from it. The radio first played that call on my third week with the county search and rescue team. Dispatch sounded confused. Not scared. Confused. Unit 4, possible distress signal from Black Pine Ridge. Our team leader, Rick, immediately reached over and turned the radio off. Not muted. Off. The truck fell silent. I stared at him. You just ignored dispatch. No. He kept his eyes on the road. I ignored that call. Someone could be dying. Rick finally looked at me. If someone is calling from Black Pine Ridge after dark. He paused. They've already been dead for years. I laughed. Nobody else did. There were 6 people riding in that truck. Every one of them looked out the windows. No one met my eyes. That was the first time I realized something was wrong with this team. We reached our original rescue an hour later. An elderly man with a broken ankle. Simple extraction. Nothing unusual. Until we loaded him into the ambulance. He grabbed my wrist. Hard. So, his voice trembled. Did you hear them calling? I frowned. Who? The ones on the ridge. I hadn't mentioned the radio. Neither had anyone else. Before I could ask another question, the paramedics pulled him away. He never looked at me again. Back at headquarters, I searched every map I could find. Black Pine Ridge wasn't closed. It wasn't marked hazardous. There wasn't even a warning sign. Just another section of national forest. I asked one of the senior volunteers why nobody went there. He stared at me for several seconds, then quietly stood up and walked away. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I searched the archived incident reports. Black Pine Ridge appeared hundreds of times. Missing hikers, hunters, campers, climbers. Most files ended the same way. Search suspended. Victim never located. But one report caught my attention. It wasn't the disappearance. It was the timestamp. Dispatch received the emergency call 3 days after the missing hiker had already been officially declared dead. I checked another report. Same thing. Another. Again. Every distress call from Black Pine Ridge arrived after the victim's confirmed time of death. I thought it had to be a clerical error. Then I listened to one of the recordings. Static filled the speaker. Heavy breathing. A man whispered, "I can see your lights." There were no rescue lights in the report. No teams had been deployed. Then the voice continued, "Please don't leave me." Behind him, someone else whispered the exact same words. 1 second later, perfectly synchronized. Like an echo, except the second voice was deeper. Slower. Not quite human. The recording ended with screaming. Not one person screaming. Dozens. The file simply read, "Do not respond." I stared at the screen. Rick appeared behind me, so quietly I almost jumped. "You weren't supposed to find those. Those people were alive." "No." He closed the folder. "They only thought they were." He locked the archive cabinet and handed me a thin envelope. No name, no markings. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 7 rules. Nothing else. Rule 1. If dispatch reports Black Pine Ridge after sunset, do not acknowledge the transmission. Rule 2. If the caller knows your name, end all radio communication immediately. Rule 3. Never answer a voice that says it can see your rescue lights. Rule 4. If dispatch insists someone is still alive, verify that dispatch is still human. I looked up. What does that even mean? Rick didn't answer. Instead, every radio in headquarters came alive at once. Static, then dispatch. Calm, professional, all available units. A pause. We have one survivor on Black Pine Ridge. Rick slowly reached over, turned every radio off, then whispered, "It's starting early tonight." Outside, someone knocked on the bay door. 3 slow knocks. From the other side came a familiar voice. My own. "Help." A long pause. I found them. Nobody moved. The voice outside waited. Then it knocked again. 3 slow knocks. Exactly 3. Not louder. Not softer. Patient. Like it knew we'd eventually answer. I stared at the bay door. That's impossible. Rick never looked away from it. It is. He reached into the envelope I'd been given and unfolded another page. I only hand this out if Rule 4 is broken. There was another page? There always is. His voice was flat. You just aren't supposed to survive long enough to read it. He slid the paper toward me. Rule 5. If you hear your own voice outside the station, do not remember what it says. I read it twice. What is that even? My head suddenly hurt. Not a headache. Pressure. Like someone pressing their thumbs against the inside of my skull. I realized I couldn't remember the exact words my voice had just spoken. I knew it had asked for help. I knew it had said something else. But whatever came after that was simply gone. Like someone had erased a sentence from my memory. Rick noticed my expression. It worked. What worked? You forgot. Before I could answer, the station phone rang. Not one ring. Every phone. Office. Garage. Break room. Storage closet. All at once. Nobody answered. The ringing continued. 20 seconds. 30. A full minute. Then they all stopped together. Silence. A young volunteer named Jenna finally whispered. It usually gives up. Rick looked toward the ceiling. No. It usually gets closer. Something scraped across the roof. Long. Slow. Metal groaned overhead. Whatever was up there wasn't walking. It was dragging something. The sound crossed from one end of the building to the other, then stopped directly above us. Dust drifted from the rafters. A single grain landed on my sleeve. It wasn't dust. It was ash. Cold gray ash. Jenna looked up. Her face drained of color. It burned again. Nobody asked what it burned. Instead, Rick unlocked another cabinet. Inside were 6 old handheld radios. None of them matched our current equipment. Each one was labeled with a year. I picked one up. Why keep these? They belonged to teams that answer the call. I slowly set it back down. There were survivors? Rick hesitated. No. Then whose radios are these? They came back. The room went silent. One by one, every ranger lowered their eyes. Rick continued. The people didn't. Before anyone could speak, one of the old radios crackled to life by itself. No batteries. No power. Just static. Then a man's exhausted voice. This is Rescue Team Bravo. Heavy breathing. We found the missing hikers. Another pause. They're all alive. Relief filled the man's voice. Then came screaming. Not from the hikers. From the rescue team. The transmission dissolved into panic. They're following us. We have 6 survivors. A pause. No. Another voice interrupted. We only rescued 5. The radio erupted with gunfire. Someone shouted, "Count again." Silence. Then one final sentence. Spoken so quietly we almost missed it. There are 7 of us now. The transmission ended. Jenna dropped the radio she was holding. It hit the floor. No one flinched, because another voice immediately replaced it. Not from the old radio. From a dispatch console. Calm. Professional. Exactly as always. Attention all search and rescue units. Rick lunged toward the console and ripped the power cable out of the wall. The speaker kept talking. There is 1 survivor on Black Pine Ridge. The monitor was completely dark. No electricity. No backup battery. Yet the voice continued. He says your team left him behind. My heart began pounding, because I recognized the name the dispatch read next. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Rick's. It was the name of a ranger whose photograph hung in our hallway. A man who had disappeared on Black Pine Ridge 11 years earlier. Then the voice changed. It became softer, more personal. And he says, a pause. He's finally close enough to come home. The bay door handle slowly turned. Once, twice, then stopped. Someone, or something, on the other side had just discovered. It was unlocked. I ignored someone begging me to save them. I heard every word. I knew exactly where they were. And I still let them die. If you've never worked search and rescue, you'll probably think I'm a monster after hearing that. Maybe I am. But if I'd answered that call, you wouldn't be listening to me now. Most people think search and rescue is simple. Someone gets lost. We find them. Sometimes they're hurt. Sometimes they're scared. Sometimes we're too late. But every call has one thing in common. We always go. At least, that's what the public believes. The truth is that every team I've ever worked with has one rescue we never respond to. One location, one voice, one radio transmission. No matter who hears it, we pretend it never happened. My name's Ethan, I've worked search and rescue in the Appalachian Mountains for almost 12 years. I've carried injured hikers through blizzards. I've rappelled into ravines. I've searched flooded caves. I've recovered people who had been missing for weeks. I've seen things that still wake me up at 3 in the morning. But nothing compares to Black Pine Ridge. The first time I heard that name was during my second week on the team. I was 26, fresh out of wilderness EMT training, still convinced enough determination and enough manpower could solve almost anything. Rick, our team leader, had already warned me that optimism doesn't survive long in these mountains. I thought he was talking about bad weather. I had no idea he meant something else entirely. We'd just finished extracting an injured backpacker when dispatch came over the radio. Unit 3, possible missing camper. Black Pine Ridge. Female caller reports she's been walking in circles for 6 hours. I reached for the microphone. Rick grabbed my wrist so hard I nearly dropped it. His expression changed instantly. He wasn't annoyed. He was terrified. He turned the radio completely off. Not muted. Off. The truck became silent except for the engine. I stared at him. "What are you doing?" Nobody answered. Every member of the team looked out the windows. No one looked at me. Finally, Rick spoke. "Forget you heard that." I laughed. "I don't get it. You don't have to, but someone needs help." Rick slowly turned toward me. "If someone calls from Black Pine Ridge after sunset." He paused. "They're already beyond helping." I thought it was some kind of superstition. Every profession has them. Firefighters, paramedics, police. I figured search and rescue had its own strange traditions too. I was wrong. The next morning, I checked the incident log. There was no missing camper, no dispatch record, no radio transmission, nothing. I even asked the dispatcher herself. She frowned. "What call?" "The one from Black Pine Ridge." She stared at me for several seconds, then quietly said, "I've never dispatched anyone there." Before I could ask another question, she walked away. That should have been the end of it. Instead, 3 nights later, the same voice called again. Only this time, she knew my name. "Ethan." The radio hissed with static. "Please hurry." I froze. I'd never spoken to that woman, never met her, never transmitted my name over dispatch. Yet she whispered it like we'd known each other for years. Then she said something that made every hair on my neck stand up. "I can see your rescue lights." I looked outside. Our trucks weren't even running. The garage doors were closed. The bay was dark. Rick walked over without saying a word. He switched off the radio again. Then he handed me a sealed manila envelope. "Congratulations," he said quietly. "You've officially been assigned to the rescue we never answer." I ignored someone who was still alive. I knew exactly where they were. I heard them begging for help over the radio, and I let them die. If you've never worked search and rescue, you'll probably think I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But if we'd gone after that call, none of us would have made it back. Most people think search and rescue is simple. Someone gets lost. Someone gets hurt. You grab your gear, load into the truck, and go bring them home. That's what we want people to believe. The truth is, there's one rescue we never answer. One location, one voice, one radio call. No matter who hears it, we pretend it never happened. My name is Ethan Carter. For almost 11 years, I worked search and rescue in the Appalachian Mountains. I've rescued children trapped in abandoned mines. I've carried injured climbers off cliffs in snowstorms. I've spent 3 days searching forests so thick sunlight barely reached the ground. I've recovered bodies that families had already given up hope of finding. Most people assume the dead are the worst part of this job. They're wrong. It's the people who are still talking after they should be dead. Everything started on my 12th day with the team. I was 27, new, confident, still convinced that every missing person could be found if you search hard enough. Rick Holloway, our team leader, warned me during my first week. There are places in these mountains where you stop looking. I laughed. I didn't join search and rescue to stop looking. He didn't smile. "You will." At the time, I thought he meant dangerous terrain. Flash floods, sinkholes, old mine shafts. I didn't realize he meant somewhere much worse. That afternoon, we rescued a father and his son who'd gotten stranded after heavy rain washed out a trail. It took nearly 7 hours. By the time we loaded them into the ambulance, darkness had already settled over the mountains. We were halfway back to headquarters when dispatch came over the radio. Unit 3. Static interrupted the transmission. Possible lost hiker. Rick reached for the volume. Everyone expected him to answer. Instead, he listened. Dispatch continued. Female caller. More static. Black Pine Ridge. Every person inside the truck froze. Nobody spoke. Dispatch finished the message. States she's been walking toward your rescue lights for 6 hours. Rick calmly reached forward. He switched the radio off. Not muted. Off. Silence filled the truck. I looked around. 6 people. Every single one stared straight ahead. No questions. No discussion. No argument. I finally broke the silence. Someone needs help. Rick kept driving. No. What do you mean, no? He didn't answer. I tried again. Dispatch just gave us coordinates. I heard. So why aren't we turning around? His hands tightened around the steering wheel. If someone calls from Black Pine Ridge after sunset, he paused. They're already beyond rescuing. I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. Nobody else did. Back at headquarters, everyone unloaded equipment without saying another word. I caught up with Rick inside the garage. You seriously ignored a rescue. I ignored that rescue. There isn't a difference. There is. I followed him into the equipment room. What makes Black Pine Ridge different? He locked the door behind us. Then he opened an old metal filing cabinet. From inside, he removed a weathered manila envelope. No labels. No dates. He held it for several seconds before finally handing it to me. Don't open it until tomorrow morning. Why? Because if you read it tonight... He looked toward the dark windows. You won't sleep. I almost opened it right there. Instead, I shoved it into my backpack. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No official letterhead. No signatures. Only 7 typed sentences. Rule 1. Never respond to distress calls from Black Pine Ridge after sunset. Rule 2. If the caller says they can see your rescue lights, leave immediately. Rule 3. Never follow a voice that already knows your name. Rule 4. Always count your team twice. Rule 5. If dispatch insists someone is still alive, verify dispatch. Rule 6. Never return after midnight. Rule 7. If someone comes back alone, do not let them inside. That was it. No explanations. No signatures. Just rules. I walked straight into Rick's office. This isn't funny. He looked up from his paperwork. I wasn't trying to be funny. Who wrote these? I don't know. You expect me to follow rules with no explanation? I expect you to stay alive. I threw the paper onto his desk. This is superstition. Rick leaned back in his chair. You know what every rookie says. What? Nothing in these mountains can scare me. He folded the paper. They all stopped saying that. I left his office convinced the entire team had created some bizarre tradition to mess with new members. For the next 3 weeks, nothing happened. Normal rescues, normal searches, normal missing hikers. Eventually, I forgot about Black Pine Ridge. Until October 18th. It had been raining since dawn. Visibility was terrible. Most hiking trails were closed. Around 6 that evening, dispatch received a report of an overdue photographer. We loaded into the truck, checked our gear, started toward the trailhead. Then the radio crackled. Dispatch sounded different. Quieter. Almost hesitant. Unit 3. Static. New priority. Rick immediately reached toward the radio. But before he could switch it off, a woman's voice interrupted dispatch. Not through another channel. The same one. Weak. Shaking. See, can anyone hear me? Everyone in the truck looked at the speaker. My name is Sarah. She sounded exhausted. I've fallen. Heavy breathing. I can't feel my legs. I instinctively grabbed the microphone. This is search and rescue. Stay calm. We're coming. Rick slapped the microphone out of my hand. It hit the dashboard. The woman's breathing became more frantic. Please. I can hear your truck. My blood ran cold. We were still 15 miles from any trail. There was no way she could hear us. She continued. I can see your lights. Rick switched the radio off. This time, his hands were shaking. No one spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Ellis, the oldest tracker on the team, whispered from the back seat. She learned Rule 2. Nobody corrected him. Nobody asked what he meant. Because every veteran in that truck already